My wife, Abby, really enjoyed going to the movies. If I wanted to make her happy, all I had to do was take her to a good movie. But it couldn't just be any movie. It had to fall into one of four categories: animation, action adventure, drama, or romance. She especially liked romance movies, sometimes called chick flicks. Abby also liked films starring Tom Torino, Matt Wright, or Brad Talbot. They were her favorite actors. Our first date was when I took Abby to see Sleepless in Seattle. She wasn't a huge fan of Tom Hanks, but she loved the story. Years later, she confessed that she fell in love with me after that movie. Why, I'm not sure. Even after 12 years of marriage, Abby is still stunning. At 5'6" and 115 pounds, she has a great figure. Her dark, emerald green eyes really stand out against her raven hair. When Abby gets dressed up, she still turns heads. I'm John Sawyer, and I'm not too bad myself. I'm 6'1" and 180 pounds with sandy-colored hair and blue eyes. Many people have told us we make a beautiful couple. In college, I never had trouble finding female companionship, but when I met Abby, I knew I didn't want anyone else. And for 12 years, I thought Abby felt the same about me. We met in high school and fell in love. Our love grew during our 4 years at university, and we got married 3 months after graduation. Abby is my true love, my soulmate, my everything. I can't imagine life without her. And while we adore our 2 kids, it's tough to be spontaneous when they're around. Tonight, though, was going to be just for the 2 of us. We decided to go dancing in the city with 3 other couples. Since we knew we'd be out late and drinking, we booked rooms at a downtown hotel. We arranged for my parents to take care of our 2 girls for the night. So it was going to be a truly special night. However, it turned out to be something special, but not in the way I expected. When we arrived at the nightclub, something felt off, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The women seemed tense about something, and one of the men seemed rather smug. Among the 3 couples, I particularly liked George and Helen, as well as Bob and Anna. George was a software engineer, while Helen was a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids. Bob owned his own plumbing company, and his wife handled the office work. The one couple I didn't care for much was Chad and Thelma. Honestly, I was okay with Thelma, but I found Chad to be unpleasant. However, Abby and Thelma had been college roommates and remained close friends, so I had to tolerate Chad. As far as I could tell, Chad had something to do with the movie industry. I think he mentioned he was an agent or something like that. It seemed he wasn't very successful, but Thelma had a well-paying job as a pharmaceutical representative. I work as a financial advisor at one of the larger brokerage firms. It was slow at first, but now I have more business than I can handle. With my firm, once you have a certain number of clients, they ask you to train someone new and pass on some of your clients. But of course, I keep the most profitable ones for myself. I've had to do that twice already, and it looks like I'll have to do it again soon. I'm making a really good living. Abby began her career as an administrative assistant for Mike Winston, an executive vice president at a regional bank. When our 2 girls came, 1 year apart, Abby stayed home with them until Stacy, our youngest, started first grade. Then one day, Mike called her and offered her a part-time job because he had been promoted to president. Abby asked for my opinion, and I encouraged her to take the opportunity. Now, if you're thinking I made a mistake letting Abby go back to work and that she's now having an affair with her boss, you'd be dead wrong. Mike is 62, bald, and more importantly, completely devoted to his wife and 5 kids. Anyway, something felt a bit off, but I didn't dwell on it. I was excited about an evening of dancing with my wife and a whole night of love afterward. As we mingled at the event, we bumped into several other couples we knew. When you go dancing often, you meet some really nice people. We even ran into an old college friend, Fred Abbott, and his wife, Brenda. While I caught up with them, Abby and the others headed to our table. I was about to join my wife as the music started, but then there was a commotion at the entrance. A crowd gathered, and Brenda gasped. "What's wrong?" Fred asked. "Don't you recognize him?" Brenda exclaimed. I glanced over and saw an extremely handsome man. He was a bit shorter, maybe 5'6" or 7, but undeniably good-looking. Both Fred and I confessed our ignorance. "That's Brad Talbot," Brenda gushed. "He and his fiancée, Rita Summers, are 2 of the hottest stars in Hollywood." "Oh, right," Fred said, craning his neck to see past Brad. "I wonder if Rita Summers is here too." "John, on a scale of 1 to 10, Rita is at least a 15. Brenda playfully slapped her husband's arm. "You would think of that." As I looked at Brad, I realized he was one of my wife's favorite actors. I wondered if I could get an autograph for her. But what happened next completely stunned me. Brad walked right up to our table and asked my wife to dance. Without hesitation, she jumped up and danced the next 4 songs with him. Feeling angry, I went back to the table and sat down. My wife hadn't even bothered to ask me if I was okay with her dancing with someone else. When the 5th song started, I tried to cut in, but Chad's glass fell and he cut his hand. "John, could you help me with this?" he asked. I glanced at my wife dancing and then at Chad. I should have gone to my wife, but instead I followed Chad to the men's room. The cut turned out to be minor, but I helped him clean it and wrap it in a paper towel. When I returned to the table, I caught a glimpse of my wife leaving with Brad. I started after them. Chad was right behind me, and when we got outside, I saw Abby getting into a car with Brad. I began to run to catch up, but Chad tripped me. I fell, but I got up quickly. "What the heck is wrong with you?" I yelled. "Brad's just taking your wife for a ride," Chad said with a smirk. Thelma arrived a few seconds later. It's a dream date for Abby. She told Chad and me how much she likes Brad, so we arranged for him to take her out. "That's my wife!" I shouted. "You didn't think I should know about this?" "Abby said you would say no," Chad said with a smirk. "Just go with the flow." "Forget you! You go with this flow!" I yelled as I punched Chad directly on the nose. The sound of it breaking was the only good thing about that night. Thelma then attacked me, punching and trying to kick me. Fortunately, Fred had seen what was happening and followed me out. He quickly intervened, grabbing Thelma and moving her away from me. "He attacked my husband!" Thelma started screaming. "No, he didn't," Fred said calmly. "You two attacked him first. He was just defending himself." Thelma went crazy and called 911. The police arrived about 10 minutes later and started taking statements. Fred stuck to his story and I did the same, mentioning that Chad had tripped me first. The people who had gathered after the commotion only saw Thelma attacking me. They told the officers they saw me just trying to get away from her. In the end, Chad and Thelma were arrested. When the police left, I was devastated. I went back to our table and found the 2 women smiling. "Where's everyone else?" Helen asked. "Chad and Thelma got arrested for assaulting me," I replied, struggling to control my anger. "Abby left with Brad and seemed pretty happy about it." "That wasn't the plan," Anna said. "She was supposed to just step outside with Brad, take a few pictures, and then come back." "My wife and Thelma apparently didn't tell you the real plan," I said as I headed to the bar. Fred caught up to me there. "Are you going to be okay?" he asked. "I don't know what's going on," I admitted. "I hope my wife's just out for a ride with that movie star and we'll be back soon. But when she gets back, we're going to have a serious talk." "Listen, John," Fred said with concern. "I don't want to upset you more, but Brenda told me that Brad Talbot is known for chasing after married women. He seems to enjoy betting them. I hope Abby's not one of them, but you should be prepared for the worst." My heart sank. I didn't know what to do, but I assured Fred I'd be fine. Before returning to the table, I tried calling Abby on her cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. When I sat down, the atmosphere was tense. The wives looked ashamed, and their husbands were furious. I kept trying to call Abby with no luck. Eventually, the other couples decided to head back to the hotel. I stayed behind, hoping Abby would come back. I waited for half an hour before going to the hotel. I stayed until 3 in the morning, calling Abby's phone every 10 minutes. In frustration, I checked out and went home. I arrived around 4 and sat on the couch. I must have fallen asleep because the sunlight woke me up at 7. Abby still wasn't home. There were no messages from her on my phone, so I checked our Facebook page. It was flooded with pictures of Brad and Abby leaving the nightclub, going to his house, and Abby entering his house on his arm. I checked Hollywood websites, and they were buzzing about Brad's latest conquest. I was furious. I immediately called my lawyer, whose call was forwarded to his home since it was Saturday. He wasn't too pleased until I explained the situation. He advised me to wait until Abby came home and explained herself. Around 11, Abby walked in with a big smile. It disappeared when she saw my expression. "We didn't do anything," she said quickly. "We just talked all night. I know I should have asked you, but I was sure you'd say no. You know how much I love movies and Brad Talbot. Last night was like a fairy tale." "Nothing happened, John. I still love you with all my heart." I glared at her, feeling like steam was about to come out of my ears. "I want you to pack up and go to your parents. I can't even look at you right now." "Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" she said, sounding annoyed and a bit scared. "We just talked. There's nothing to it. It's not a big deal." "It's a huge deal to me," I said through clenched teeth. "I don't believe for a second that nothing happened. But let's pretend for a moment that nothing did. You still humiliated me in front of everyone." "Now you're being overly dramatic," Abby retorted, hands on her hips. Outside of our group, no one knows anything. And Helen and Anna know it was just harmless fun for me. You jerk, I snapped, causing Abby to flinch. I'd never talked to her like this before. It's all over the news. They have photos of you and Brad leaving the club going to his house, and by now there are probably shots of you leaving his house this morning. I think our marriage is done. So get your stuff and get out before I do something I'll regret. Please, John, I think you're blowing this out of proportion, Abby pleaded, tears welling up. I love you so much. I'm sorry I upset you, but nothing happened. I thought you'd understand once you knew that. We need to work through this. Think about the girls. You didn't think about them when you sped off with that jerk movie star, I hissed. How would you feel if Stacy or Gail did something like that when they're older? Abby went pale at my words and then broke into tears. I'm so sorry, John. I never thought it would turn into this big mess. I messed up. Please forgive me. You're right. You didn't think, I said, my anger escalating. I had to get her out before I did something I'd regret. So I left her standing there and went to our bedroom. I grabbed a suitcase and started packing her clothes. I'll do it, Abby said, her voice choked with sobs after a few minutes. Slowly, she packed the suitcase and carried it downstairs. I didn't offer to help. I waited until she left and then slammed the door hard. Peeking out the window, I saw her put the bag in the trunk and bury her head in her hands. I wanted to comfort her, but I was too furious. After about 20 minutes, she started the car and drove away. I immediately called my parents and explained what had happened. I asked them to keep the girls a bit longer, and if Abby showed up, to tell her I had them. They agreed. Then I was left alone to think about the mess my marriage had become. I kept replaying everything in my head. Abby insisted nothing had happened. Could it be true? I didn't know, but my gut screamed that she was lying. Could I forgive her and move forward? Maybe, if no one else knew besides our friends, as she believed. But now that it was all over the internet, I couldn't see a way to salvage our marriage. I wanted revenge against them both, but I couldn't think of how to do it. I cried for at least an hour, pounding the walls and doors as I walked around. I felt powerless. There was no way I could get back at Brad, a big shot in Hollywood. A divorce would hurt me financially, but I was willing to work from home and fight for full custody of the girls if it came to that. I thought I had a good chance since I was the more stable parent. Abby probably never thought her actions could cost her the girls, but the idea of a divorce tearing my daughters apart devastated me even more. Around 1 o'clock, as I was making more coffee, the phone rang. So far, the media hadn't found my number, but I knew it wouldn't last. Hello? I answered. Is this John Sawyer, and is your wife's name Abby? A woman's voice asked. Not interested in talking to reporters, I snapped. She giggled softly. Good. I hate them too. Who is this? I asked, ready to hang up. I'm Rita Summers, she said softly. You probably know my fiancé, Brad Talbot? Yeah, I know that jerk, I said, eager to end the call. Do you love your wife? Rita asked out of nowhere. I sighed. Despite everything, I still love her. But after all that's happened, I don't see how we can save our marriage. If I could offer you a way to save your marriage and also salvage my relationship with Brad, would you be interested? My heart raced. I had to sit down and think. Finally, I said, yes, I want to save my marriage, but I don't see how. Once again, there was that soft giggle followed by a sigh. I've loved Brad for a long time. We've known each other since childhood. He came from a messed up family, just like me. His dad was a womanizer, and his mom hated all men, including Brad. She never showed him any love. No matter what he did, it was never enough for her. He's been with married women before. I think it's his way of trying to find the love his mom never gave him. My family was messed up too. My mom was an alcoholic, and my dad abused me. Back then, Brad was my rock, and I loved him with all my heart. But then he moved away when his parents split. I cried for weeks. We met again in Hollywood after we both found success. I'd heard about Brad's past, and I was wary about starting something with him. But when we saw each other, we fell in love all over again. When we got engaged, he swore he was done with other women. When I asked him about your wife, he said nothing happened. I can't prove it either way, but just the thought of losing Brad is tearing me apart. Yeah, my wife said nothing happened too, I confessed. And the thought of losing her hurts just as much. Do you believe her? No, I don't. Me neither. I know Brad, and it's not like him to invite a woman over and do nothing. But I guess stranger things have happened. Still, I'm assuming something did happen. So I want him to see the pain he's caused me, and I want your wife to feel the same. I don't know if that'll fix things, but I hope we can move forward with our partners. I'm on board so far, I said, but how do we do this? We do it together, she said. First, we need to start talking to our partners about reconciliation. I'll reach out to Brad, but I'm not talking to him right now. After a couple of weeks, I'll start. You should let your wife come home around the same time. I'll let you know when. You'll keep your distance and don't sleep with her. Why let her back in? Because once she's home, we'll have dinner together and I'll explain my plan. I still need to figure out some details. I was still unsure about the plan, but since I didn't have any better ideas, I decided to go along with it. First, I called my parents and said I'd pick the girls up in half an hour. Then I rang my administrative assistant, Joni, and let her know I'd be working from home for the next week. I could tell she already knew about Brad and Abby from her sympathetic tone, and she offered to help in any way she could. Next, I dialed Abby's parents' house. Abby's dad picked up, sounding very sorry. He'd seen the news and felt embarrassed. When I asked to speak to Abby, she broke down in tears, apologizing and wanting to come home to talk. Abby, I said calmly, I think it's best for us to have some space for a while. I'll be working from home next week. You've got work Monday through Wednesday. Let's plan for you to pick up the girls Wednesday evening. We can talk about everything then. I'll take them on Sunday evening. Please, John, she cried. I want to come home now. I want us to be a family. Don't you want that too? I thought we were, I replied sadly. But now I'm not sure. I'll see you Wednesday around 5. I picked up the girls and explained that Mommy was spending a few days with Pop and Granny. They had lots of questions, but they forgot all about it when we reached Chuck E. Cheese's. After a few hours of games and dinner, we headed home. The phone rang as soon as we walked in. I didn't recognize the number and ignored it. But then, it kept ringing every 5 minutes. I finally unplugged it. Around 6, my cell phone rang. It was Abby. Why aren't you picking up? She snapped. Because it's just reporters asking about your supposed affair with Brad Talbot, I retorted. There's no affair, Abby insisted. I told you nothing happened. Well then, you need to tell the world because they sure don't believe it, I replied sarcastically. There was complete silence on the other end of the line. Then Abby asked if she could speak to the girls. I handed them the phone and listened in. They were thrilled to tell her all about their day at Chuck E. Cheese. Eventually, Stacy passed the phone back to me, saying Mommy wanted to talk to me. Abby pleaded to come home, but I told her I needed more time. Wednesday evening, Abby showed up around 4 instead of 5. I was a bit annoyed she didn't follow my instructions, but I let it slide. The girls were thrilled to see her, and Abby showered them with kisses. When she came to kiss me, I backed away. She looked hurt and annoyed. So, that's how it's going to be, she said irritably. Maybe I should just take the girls and leave. If that's what you want, I replied calmly, starting to walk away. No, Abby quickly interjected, sounding a bit panicked. Let's sit down and talk about our problems. The girls went to pack their overnight bags because Abby had told them they were visiting their grandparents. What are we going to do? Abby asked after an awkward silence. I wish I knew, I replied. Right now I feel hurt, embarrassed, and angry. Any ideas on how to deal with those feelings? All I can do is apologize, Abby said, her voice trembling slightly. I messed up big time. Please forgive me. I don't want to lose you. Abby, it's not that simple, I said, sitting back and crossing my arms. To the whole world, I'm seen as a fool. My wife cheated on me, and I didn't do a thing about it. Abby started crying. I never meant to hurt you. I was just so excited to meet Brad Talbot and see his house. I knew you'd be a bit mad at me, but I never thought it would turn into such a mess. Abby, I genuinely hope we can work through this, I said, and her face lit up momentarily. But I've also spoken to a lawyer. If things lead to a divorce, I'll be seeking full custody of the girls. You should consider getting your own attorney. I don't want a divorce, she cried. And you can't take my girls away from me. Abby, I'm not saying we'll divorce, but we have to be prepared for the worst. I don't want to hurt you, I fibbed. But with all the attention you're getting, the courts might favor my custody request. Please don't, Abby begged. I'll do anything to fix us. Why don't we keep talking? I suggested. Let's have lunch next Sunday when you drop off the girls. If you keep the girls with you, she said, her voice carrying a hint of anger, I won't like all this back and forth. It's not good for them. If you do that, then I'll have to start divorce proceedings right away. And remember, your reputation is tainted. I doubt the courts will see you favorably. At that, Abby seemed to deflate. I won't do that. I don't want a divorce. At the start of the second week, I returned to my office. My assistants were understanding, but some of my customers weren't as sympathetic. Two of them found the situation amusing and began teasing me. I asked them politely to stop, but they persisted. Fed up, I informed them that I was terminating our relationship and transferring their portfolios elsewhere. Despite their attempts to apologize, I made it clear our business was over. Word spread among my clients, and the talk about my wife and Brad ceased. Around 2 p.m., Rita called me. "Do you have plans for tonight?" she asked. When I said no, she replied, "Good, because you're having dinner with me at the Zoom room at 7. Dress code is formal." Then she hung up. I was quite surprised when Rita mentioned she had reservations at the Zoom room. It's the fanciest restaurant in town, and getting a table there usually takes ages. Plus, it's super expensive. At 7, I showed up and was led to a private dining room in the back. It only had a table for two, but the place was decked out luxuriously, complete with a velvet couch. My mind couldn't help but wander to what might have happened on that couch. About 5 minutes later, Rita Summers walked in. As I stood up, I couldn't help but notice how stunning she was. I was sure the whole restaurant would have turned to look when she entered. She seemed to be around 5'4", with long blonde hair, warm brown eyes, and a figure that turned heads. But it was her smile that really captivated you. It had this way of making you feel alive. I couldn't fathom why Brad would stray from a woman like her. "Can I call you John?" she asked as she sat down across from me. I nodded. "And what should I call you?" "Rita, of course," she replied with a soft laugh that made me smile. We ordered drinks and chatted for a while. I shared a bit about my job, but mostly I told her funny stories about my daughters or my awkward teenage years. Then the waiter came back to take our order. I didn't want to rush Rita, but I was eager to hear her plan. I desperately wanted to save my marriage, but I had no idea how to go about it. Once we finished eating, Rita leaned back in her chair. "First off, John," Rita began with a sad smile, "that slimy Chad Tompkins orchestrated this whole mess. Thinks he's some big-shot movie agent, but he's nothing but a pimp. He sets up naive folks, especially married women, to get cozy with movie stars. You wouldn't believe how many people he's helped get tangled up with these celebrities." "You're talking to someone who knows firsthand," I said with a growl. Although I didn't realize Chad's exact role until now. At least I got him arrested. "Really?" Rita's eyes lit up. "That's good news, but don't be too hard on your wife. Brad could charm the socks off Mother Teresa. Your wife isn't the first married woman to fall for his act, but I'm determined to make her the last. And if I can't do that, what I have in mind will at least make him and your wife pay for the pain they caused us. I can't promise that after my plan unfolds, either of us will still be with our partners. But either way, we'll have the satisfaction of not letting them get away with betraying us." Rita's leniency toward my wife surprised me, but I was relieved to hear there'd be consequences. Now I just wanted to know what she had in mind. "So, what's your plan?" I asked. "Before I spill the beans," she said, "I just want to say, John, you're one good-looking guy, and you've got charm. Your wife messed up big time risking your marriage. If we'd met differently, I might have been interested. That's very sweet of you to say, but we both know we live in different worlds. And besides being stunning, you're also incredibly compassionate." "You're too kind. We do come from different circles, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm drawn to you." "Thank you," I replied, eager to hear her plan. "So, what's the next step?" "Over the next 2 weeks, I plan to become one of your clients." "Excuse me? I'm not following. A client?" "Yes, you provide financial advice, right?" Rita said, smirking. "Yes, I do." I was still puzzled about where this was going. "So, I'll be investing some money with you," she explained. "But we'll need to have a few meetings to discuss the details. I think 4 meetings should do it. 2 at your office and 2 over lunch. I'll choose the locations." "All right," I said, still unsure of the purpose. "I can set up an account, but you'll need to invest at least $10,000. "Oh, I'll be investing much more than that," she said, her smile widening. "Meanwhile, you won't tell your wife that I'm your client. You'll keep meeting with her to talk about reconciliation. After 2 weeks, you'll let her move back home, but you won't sleep with her. Then, on October 15th, you and your wife will attend the Reading is Critical Gala, a charity event I've been involved with for years. Most people don't know I'm associated with it, which is how I prefer it. I usually attend every other year, but I'll be there this year, and you and your wife will join me." "All right. I was following along until the charity gala. I know those tickets cost $20,000 each. I can't justify spending that much. Rita giggled again, flashing me a smile that sent a tingle down to my toes. Don't worry, your tickets will be complimentary. You'll just tell your wife that a client gave them to you. I'm still not seeing how this helps, I said, feeling frustrated. Well, you see, John, part of the entertainment for the night is an escort auction. An escort auction? Not that kind of escort, she giggled once more. We auction off willing men to the women in attendance. The highest bidder gets to put a sort of slave collar on them. Then the men are at the mercy of the winning women, Rita explained with a laugh before continuing. Most of the men are bachelors, but married men also participate, allowing their wives to bid on them. Occasionally, a married man is won by someone other than his wife. Those married men usually behave because if they don't, their wives would be furious. However, at this year's gala, a married man will be auctioned off, and his wife won't be the winning bidder. And what happens afterward won't be innocent. I still had a puzzled look on my face. Rita laughed and gave my hand a pat. You're the married man who will be auctioned off, and I'll be the winning bidder. So, all you have to do is rent a tuxedo, buy your wife a new dress, and be my guests. Suddenly it clicked. Rita's plan was brilliant. Both Brad and Abby would experience what we had gone through. I knew it was all a show, but just spending the night with Rita Summers while everyone assumed the worst would help balance things out. It would shift the focus away from me as a cuckold and onto Brad. Plus, my wife would understand the hurt and embarrassment I felt. Maybe then we could seek counseling and move past this mess. The following weeks flew by. The first time Rita visited my office, all the girls there were practically bursting with excitement. Our lunch meetings were held in discreet restaurants, though I couldn't understand why we needed such secrecy. Most of our discussions could have happened in my office, but mostly we just shared stories. They were enjoyable lunches, and I learned a lot about Rita and Brad. She genuinely loved him and would be devastated if they broke up, but she was ready to leave him if he continued his old ways. A week before the gala, I let Abby come back home, but I made it clear I'd be sleeping in the guest room. She seemed hurt but didn't argue. On the Wednesday before the gala, I came home with the tickets and Abby's eyes lit up. She started talking excitedly about all the celebrities who would be there. Then she scolded me for spending so much money. It didn't cost me anything, I explained. One of my clients gave me the tickets. I thought it would be a fun evening. By the way, I think you should get a new dress for the night, something sexy. Abby was over the moon. I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered that evening when I thought it would be magical, only to end up feeling foolish. It was time for her to understand my pain. When we arrived, there were already about 500 people there. At check-in, there was a table where you could sign up for the auction. I noticed a line of men filling out forms. There were 5 really good-looking guys in line, so I turned to Abby. What do you think? I asked innocently, pointing at the table. It's for charity and we didn't pay for the tickets. How about I sign up and you can bid on me? Abby chuckled, but it lacked Rita's musicality. I don't have any money, and I didn't bring my wallet because it wouldn't fit in this bag. Following Rita's advice, I had cash with me. Here's $1,000. You probably won't need to pay more than $50, but it's for charity, so offer at least $200. You're worth the whole $1,000 and more, Abby said with a big smile. I got in line and filled out the form when I reached the front. Glancing at the list, I saw there were about 18 or 20 guys signed up. If I didn't know this was a setup, I would never have had the guts to do it. Just as I was about to leave, a woman at the desk said, "You checked that you're married?" I nodded, and she handed me another form. "I hope your wife is with you, or you won't be able to participate. She needs to fill this form out and sign it." I motioned for Abby and explained what they wanted. She quickly filled it out. What Abby didn't realize, because she didn't read the form, was that she was agreeing to let me do whatever the winning bidder requested. After the paperwork was done, we went to find our table. Rita had seated us with 2 starlets, a television anchor, and 2 actors from a national soap opera. My wife was dazzled, not just by the people at our table, but also by the other celebrities at the gala. When the auction began, all the men offering themselves were called up. I smiled at my wife and stepped forward. As it turned out, there were 24 participants, and I'm sure it was by Rita's design that I was left for last. By the time I took the stage, they had already raised well over $300,000. And I have to admit, the bidding was lively and entertaining. Our final contestant is a local guy, the announcer, a well-known game show host, declared. His name is John Sawyer, and he's married with 2 kids. I'm sure his wife is somewhere out there breaking the piggy bank. So, should we kick off the bidding at $50? I say he's worth at least 100, an older lady in the front row shouted. Can you handle dishes, dear? I chuckled and shouted back. I can wash and dry them. The crowd burst into laughter. That's more than my husband can manage, another older woman chimed in. I'll offer 200. Then it shot up to 500. Soon enough, I heard Abby's voice shout, I'll bid $1,000. The crowd cheered, but almost immediately, a younger woman countered with $2,000. Before I knew it, the bid had climbed to 5,000. I glanced at Abby, who looked around, utterly bewildered. I just shrugged at her. From the back of the room came a bid of $10,000, quickly followed by one for $15,000. If I hadn't known it was all staged, I might have let it go to my head. The bid hit $25,000, and I started to feel a bit nervous. I thought a few thousand would seal the deal, but this was way more than I expected. Finally, from the far side of the room, I heard Rita's voice. I bid $100,000. There was stunned silence, not just because of the amount, but also because of who had made the bid. Rita Summers moved down to just below the stage as the crowd roared. She smiled up at me and then turned to the crowd, saying, And I don't even care if he can do dishes. The room erupted into cheers. I have to admit I was blushing furiously. Rita came up and put the traditional collar around my neck, giving me a soft kiss on the lips. By prearrangement, we went back to where Abby was sitting. She was stunned, not knowing what to do or say. So I leaned over and kissed her gently on the lips, then handed her the car keys. Best laid plans, Abby. As I understand the rules, I'm Miss Summers for the next 12 hours. I'll see you back at the house. Rita and I danced a few dances at the gala. During these dances, she kept nibbling on my ear. I could see Abby watching me with a look of shock. When Rita took my hand and led me out of the ballroom, I saw Abby's lips begin to tremble. After the gala, Rita took me to another nightclub in a limo. We danced and talked there for an hour. Then we went to a private screening of a new movie, filled with Hollywood A-listers. The film, in my opinion, was terrible, and Rita agreed. However, when we spoke to the director, we both praised it. Later, the limo took us to a sketchy part of town. I noticed 2 cars behind us, which Rita explained were part of her security detail. She pointed out 2 rundown houses across the street. That one with the porch light still on used to be my home. The one across the street was where Brad lived. It wasn't as bad a neighborhood back then, but it was still pretty rough. It was almost 3 a.m. when we arrived at Rita's condo. She explained that she owned 6 condos. 1 in Hollywood, 1 in New York, 1 in Florida, 2 in Europe, and 1 in South America. This condo was 3 stories high, equivalent to 2 regular-sized homes. In the den, Rita poured me a drink. As I sat on the couch, I started to chuckle. I wish I had a camera to capture Abby's reaction. I almost feel guilty about this, but not quite. Rita sat close beside me and placed her hand on my knee. John, be honest with me. Do you truly believe your wife when she says nothing happened? Neither of us can prove it, but deep down, I think they did, I replied sadly. That's why it still hurts so much. I understand, John, and I'm almost certain that Brad had an affair with your wife, Rita said angrily. I think it's only fair to turn the tables. With that, she leaned in and kissed me softly. I was taken aback by her proposition. I had assumed we would go to Rita's home and sleep separately, letting everyone believe we were intimate when we weren't. But now she was offering herself to me. It didn't take me long to decide. Perhaps if I were a better man, I would have declined. But I was still wounded by my wife's actions. Plus, who would pass up the chance to be with Rita Summers? We kissed passionately on the couch for about 20 minutes. It was exhilarating to be so close to such a stunning woman. Eventually, she took my hand and led me to her bedroom. Once inside, Rita began a dance. I had been intrigued since our first kiss, and watching Rita dancing made me feel like I might get it right then and there. When Rita removed her wear, she guided me onto her bed. While my wife was skilled, I found Rita's skills even more pleasurable. Or perhaps it was just the novelty of it all. At that moment, I didn't care. As I neared the final stage, I informed Rita. Rita and I had a special morning together, filled with quiet talks and close moments that made us feel really connected. Her kind words and gentle touch made everything feel warm and cozy between us. We laughed and held each other, forgetting about time as we enjoyed being together. We felt really close, trusting each other more as we spent more time together. Rita looked at me in a way that made me feel really loved and important. She made promises with her eyes that felt like promises of many more good times to come. As the morning sun lit up the room, we realized we had spent a lot of time just enjoying being with each other. Even though it got late, Rita's laugh made me feel okay about it. It was one of those mornings where everything felt just right, being with someone who understands and cares about you a lot. It was all about the happiness we found in being together, a reminder of how great it feels to have someone like that in your life. Remember, your wife wasn't worried when you were waiting at home. And remember, nothing actually happened, Rita reminded me with a playful tone. I chuckled, and we took a shower together. Afterward, we got dressed, and Rita made eggs for me while we waited for the limo to pick me up. During the ride home, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. If Abby was willing, I believed we could now start working on moving past everything. Upon entering our home, I found Abby in tears in the living room. "I wasn't sure if you were going to come back," she said, her voice filled with misery. "The news is buzzing about Rita Summers paying $100,000 for a night with you. At first, I thought it was just revenge, but then I saw how she looked at you. If she spent that much, she must really care for you. But I don't blame you after what I did. Is there any hope for us?" "First of all, Abby," I fibbed, "nothing happened." She stared at me, initially with a hint of anger, but it quickly faded. "Really?" "Rita is a new client of mine," I explained. "She felt it was only fair given what Brad did to me. Plus, Rita's the one who gave me the tickets. Normally, she donates $100,000 anonymously every year. This time, she did it publicly to send a message to her fiancé. So, you're right. It was about getting back at Brad. Whether we have a future or not is up to you. If you're willing to work on our marriage and attend counseling, I'm on board too." Abby hurried into my arms, and I kissed her passionately. Then I guided her to our bedroom. Somehow, I managed to find the energy, and we made love twice. Afterward, I drifted back to sleep until my two girls bounced onto the bed around 2 in the afternoon. We had a peaceful dinner with the girls, and once they were tucked in bed, Abby and I sat together on our patio, holding hands. In that moment, I felt certain that we could mend our marriage and move forward together. Epilogue. Abby and I sought help from a counselor named Wendy, and she played a significant role in resolving our issues. Surprisingly, Wendy was tougher on Abby than I expected. I assumed she might be more sympathetic because she's a woman, but she pointed out that Abby had planned her affair while I hadn't. Even though we both insisted that nothing physical happened, I don't think Wendy fully believed us. Nevertheless, she emphasized that the decision to turn to someone else instead of our spouses was a betrayal in itself. Abby blushed deeply during much of those sessions. Wendy kind of let me off the hook, seeing my night with Rita as her way of getting back at her fiancé, which was true, but Wendy didn't know that I was deeply involved in planning it. Still, the counseling sessions were very beneficial. There was one unexpected outcome from all the chaos. Abby no longer enjoys going to the movies or even watching them on TV. However, she'll still accompany the girls if they want to see a children's movie. Regarding Chad and Thelma, I dropped the charges against Thelma, explaining to the authorities that she believed she was protecting her husband. However, I proceeded with the charges against Chad, resulting in a 3-month sentence in the county detention center. We cut ties with Chad and Thelma, and Abby no longer speaks to Thelma. They had a major falling out because Abby blames Thelma for almost ruining our marriage. I won't pretend to understand my wife's reasoning on this matter. Rita and Brad tied the knot in what was dubbed the wedding of the century. With over 1,000 guests, if you weren't there, you weren't anybody in Hollywood. Abby and I didn't score an invite, but I did send Brad a wedding gift. I bought a pair of bull's horns, sliced them in half, and shipped them with a note saying, "You keep away from my wife, and I'll steer clear of yours." I was still pretty angry with Brad at the time, but Rita assured me he found the gift hilarious. He even framed the note and displayed it in his study. As Hollywood tends to go, their marriage barely lasted a year. True to her word, when Rita caught wind of Brad's wandering eye, she filed for divorce. It was a peaceful split, and they remained friends. It's a shame, though. Rita confided in me that she genuinely loved him. From what she shared about their relationship, it was evident they had a deep bond. But sadly, it wasn't enough to keep them together. Oh, and Rita's still a client. When we set up her account, she deposited a cool $1 million. I half expected her to close the account after her revenge plan played out, but she stuck with it, and when it hit $1.5 million, she added another $2 million. We haven't met face-to-face since the gala, but we do FaceTime about 4 times a year to chat about her investments. Sometimes it's just to catch up on life. Rita's sharp when it comes to business, surprisingly conservative with her investments. I've no clue about her politics. Even though our quarterly updates on her portfolio take about 20 minutes, we end up spending an hour or two chatting about everything else. After she split from Brad, Rita joked that she should have picked me over him. I laughed it off, reminding her we come from different worlds. Since then, she teases me about keeping an eye on me. She even jokes that if the stars align and I'm single while she's done with acting, she'll make a play for me. I know it's all in jest, but it's a nice thought to hold on to. Abby and I are almost at our 10th wedding anniversary. We've hit a few bumps along the way, but overall, our marriage has been fantastic. When I reflect on it all, I'm sure that without Rita's help, I might have ended up divorcing Abby. Now I can't picture life without her. Oh, and there's one more thing. Abby's pregnant and we're expecting a baby boy. I'm beyond excited.